The Shadow in the Basement. It was the summer of 2010 in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. The town was small, filled with well-kept lawns, white picket fences, and families who had lived there for generations. Nothing much ever happened, and that's why when the local 911 dispatcher received a call from a frantic woman in the middle of the night, it sent a chill down their spine. 911. What's your emergency? A woman's voice, trembling and barely above a whisper, came through the line. I think there's someone in my house. I'm in the basement with my kids. He's upstairs, walking around. The dispatcher, a seasoned worker named Sheila, kept her voice calm. Okay, ma'am, stay with me. What's your name and address? The woman whispered her address, 352 Elm Street. It was a typical two-story house, nothing unusual. Sheila typed the information into the system, her fingers shaking just slightly. Can you tell me where the person is now? Sheila asked, glancing at the clock. It was 3:15 a.m., the dead of night. The woman took a deep breath. He's upstairs. I heard him moving things around. I locked the basement door, but, oh God, I think he knows we're down here. Sheila's heart raced, but she remained professional. Stay as quiet as you can. Help is on the way, but I need you to keep talking to me. How many people are in the house with you? Just me and my 2 kids. They're sleeping. I haven't woken them up. That's good. Keep them calm. Do you have any weapons in the basement? The woman paused. No, I don't think so. Just tools and old furniture. As Sheila kept the woman on the line, she could hear faint noises in the background. A soft creaking sound, like footsteps on old wooden floorboards. Sheila's stomach tightened. The police were en route, but it would take them about 10 minutes to get there. The woman didn't have 10 minutes. I'm going to stay with you the whole time. Don't hang up, okay? Sheila's voice was steady, but internally she felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. What's your name? Carla. My name is Carla. Okay, Carla. Do you know if the intruder broke in? Did you hear any glass breaking or doors being forced open? No, I didn't hear anything. It's strange. It's like he was already inside. Carla's voice trailed off, her fear palpable through the phone. I don't know how he got in. The line went silent for a moment and Sheila held her breath. Carla? Are you still with me? Carla's voice came back, lower than before. I can hear him. He's at the basement door. He's jiggling the handle. Sheila's blood ran cold. Stay calm, Carla. The police are almost there. Is there anything you can use to barricade the door? I pushed a table against it, but I don't know if it'll hold. Carla's voice was shaking now, on the verge of tears. He's whispering something. I can hear him whispering. Sheila strained to listen, but couldn't make out anything over the phone. What's he saying, Carla? Carla let out a shaky breath. I don't know. It's not English. It sounds wrong. Sheila's heart pounded in her chest. It's going to be okay, Carla. The officers are only a few minutes away. Just keep quiet and hold tight. For a few moments, there was silence. Then Carla spoke again, her voice barely audible. He stopped. I don't hear him anymore. Sheila swallowed hard. That's good. Stay quiet. The police will be there any second. Then, just as Sheila thought the worst was over, Carla let out a soft, terrified gasp. Oh my God, I can hear him. He's down here. He's in the basement. Sheila's blood froze. Carla, stay quiet. Don't make a sound. The officers are almost there. But Carla wasn't listening anymore. Her voice was a frantic whisper. He's in the shadows. I can see him. He's watching me. Oh God, he's watching me. Sheila could hear Carla's breathing become more rapid. her panic growing. Sheila tried to calm her down, but before she could speak, Carla's voice dropped even lower, filled with sheer terror. "He's smiling. He's smiling at me." Then the line went dead. Sheila immediately tried to reconnect, but there was no answer. Panic surged through her as she relayed the urgency to the officers who were almost at the house. She felt utterly powerless, her only lifeline to Carla severed. 5 minutes later, police arrived at 352 Elm Street. They found the house quiet, the front door still locked. They called for backup and proceeded to break down the door. With their guns drawn, they swept through the house, finding nothing out of place until they reached the basement. The basement door was barricaded from the inside with a table, just as Carla had said. The officers forced their way in, finding the basement empty. No Carla, no children. There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints, and nothing to suggest anyone had been down there at all. The only thing they found was Carla's phone, lying on the floor, still connected to the 911 line. The children's beds were untouched, as if they had never been disturbed. No trace of Carla or her kids was ever found. No evidence of an intruder, no broken windows or forced doors. It was as though they had simply vanished. The police investigation led nowhere. There was no explanation for Carla's disappearance, and over the years, the case went cold. But Sheila never forgot that night, and neither did the officers who responded. Years later, strange reports began to surface about 352 Elm Street. New families moved in and out of the house, but they all left after a few months, complaining of strange noises, footsteps at night, whispering voices, and the feeling of being watched. Some claimed to hear faint laughter coming from the basement, but when they went to check, no one was ever there. The house eventually fell into disrepair, abandoned by the town and left to rot. To this day, Sheila still wonders what happened to Carla and her children that night. Every time she thinks about it, she remembers Carla's final words, and a chill runs down her spine. "He's smiling at me." No one ever found out who or what was smiling back. The Vanished Child. In the early 2000s, a small town in the Midwest became the setting for one of the most disturbing 911 calls ever received by the local police department. It was the middle of winter, and the nights were long and cold, when a frantic call came through from a woman living on the outskirts of town. She was barely able to speak, her voice trembling with terror. "My daughter, she's gone. Someone took her. Please, you have to help me." The operator tried to calm the woman, asking for details, but the connection was poor. The woman managed to give her address before the line went dead. Officer Jenna Roberts was the first to arrive at the scene, a small, snow-covered house surrounded by dense woods. She knew the family well. The mother, Ellen, was a single parent raising her 7-year-old daughter, Lily. When Jenna knocked on the door, it swung open slowly, revealing a house in disarray. Ellen was sitting on the living room floor, clutching one of Lily's dolls to her chest, her face pale and tear-streaked. "She's gone," Ellen whispered, her voice hoarse. "I put her to bed, and when I checked on her, she wasn't there. The window, it was open." Jenna looked toward the small bedroom down the hall. The window was indeed open, snow blowing in and settling on the floor. There were no footprints outside, no sign of a struggle. It was as if Lily had simply vanished into thin air. Ellen insisted she had heard something, footsteps, a voice whispering outside Lily's window. But when she looked, there had been nothing, no one. The search for Lily lasted for days, but no trace of her was ever found. The town mourned the loss of the little girl, assuming the worst. But for Ellen, The nightmare had only just begun. A week after Lily's disappearance, Ellen called 911 again. This time, her voice was a hollow whisper. "She's back. I saw her, standing in the woods just outside my window. But she's different. She's not my Lily." Jenna responded to the call, arriving at the house once more. Ellen was hysterical, insisting that Lily had returned, but that something was wrong. She was standing there, Jenna. She was smiling, but it wasn't her smile. It was like she was waiting for me. Jenna searched the woods but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone. But Ellen refused to believe it. She became obsessed, staring out the window for hours, waiting for her daughter to return. Then, one night, Ellen didn't call 911. Her neighbors did. They reported hearing screams coming from her house. When the police arrived, they found the house empty. Ellen was gone. The only thing left was a single set of small footprints in the snow, leading from the window into the woods. The footprints stopped at the edge of the tree line, disappearing as if the person had been lifted into the air. Ellen was never found, and neither was Lily. But locals say that on cold winter nights, you can still hear the faint sound of a child's laughter coming from the woods, followed by the distant scream of a mother calling her daughter's name. The Last Dispatcher. It was the kind of night no dispatcher ever wants to experience. Lisa Morgan was working the night shift at the county's 911 call center, a job she had held for over a decade. She had heard her fair share of strange calls, domestic disputes, car accidents, the occasional prank, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to face. At 2:47 a.m., the phone rang. 911, what's your emergency? Lisa said, her voice calm and professional. For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice came through, barely audible, a child's voice. Help me, please. He's coming. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. What's your name? Where are you? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The child didn't answer the questions, just kept repeating, he's coming, he's coming. Lisa could hear the fear in the child's voice. Okay, I'm sending help right now. Stay on the line with me. But before she could get any more information, the line went dead. Lisa quickly traced the call to an address on the outskirts of town, an old farmhouse that had been abandoned for years. She relayed the information to the nearest officers, urging them to check it out. When the officers arrived, they found the house exactly as expected, empty and derelict. But something about the scene didn't sit right. One of the officers reported feeling a cold chill as he entered, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees. There were no signs of life, but in one of the rooms, they found something that made their blood run cold. A dusty, old phone on the floor, its cord ripped from the wall. The phone had been disconnected for years. Lisa was shaken but had to carry on. However, just an hour later, she received another call. This time, it was from a woman, her voice frantic. Please, you have to help me. He's outside my window. He's trying to get in. Lisa tried to get the woman's name and location, but the call was filled with static, and then the line went dead again. For the next few hours, calls kept coming in, each one more disturbing than the last. People reporting strange figures outside their homes, shadows moving in the darkness, whispers coming from empty rooms. But each time Lisa tried to trace the calls, they all led back to the same place, the abandoned farmhouse. As the night wore on, Lisa began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread. The air in the dispatch center felt heavy, suffocating. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly the end of her shift. Just as she started to relax, the phone rang one last time. She hesitated before answering. 911. What's your emergency? There was silence, then a familiar voice. Help me, please. He's coming. Lisa's blood ran cold. It was the same child's voice from earlier. Before she could respond, the voice on the other end changed. It was no longer a child. It was deep, guttural, filled with malice. I'm already here. The line went dead. Lisa immediately called the officers back to the farmhouse, but they found nothing. No one had been there. Lisa quit her job the next day. She never worked another night shift, and to this day, she refuses to talk about that night. But the calls never stopped. Even after the farmhouse was demolished, 911 dispatchers still receive calls from that location. The voice on the other end always the same. Help me, please, he's coming. No one ever knows who or what is coming. But those who've heard the calls say they've felt an indescribable terror, as if something ancient and evil is lurking just out of sight, waiting for the moment to strike. And every time the phone rings, they fear it will be the last. The unanswered call. It was a dreary night in the fall of 1998 when Officer John Harper sat in his squad car on a routine patrol through the deserted streets of Brooksville. The small town, nestled deep in the woods of upstate New York, was known for its uneventful nights and simple folks. John had worked the graveyard shift for nearly 15 years, and though the job was often mundane, he appreciated the quiet that came with it. The radio in his car crackled as dispatch broke the silence. Unit 7, we've got a call at 135 Maple Road. Noise complaint, possibly a domestic dispute. Caller reported screaming, but the line went dead before more details could be gathered. John frowned. Maple Road was in a heavily wooded part of town, miles away from the nearest neighbor. He figured it was some late-night prank or a couple fighting in isolation. Still, it was his job to investigate. As John pulled onto Maple Road, the atmosphere changed. The road was unusually dark, the towering trees seeming to swallow any light that dared to pass through. His headlights illuminated the road ahead, casting long, eerie shadows. The house at 135 was an old, dilapidated farmhouse, barely visible through the thick fog that clung to the ground. It had been abandoned for years, or so John had thought. He parked his cruiser at the end of the driveway and made his way up the uneven path. The house loomed above him, its windows like black, soulless eyes. A single flickering light bulb on the porch provided little comfort. John knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time, but still nothing. He glanced back at the road, feeling a cold shiver run down his spine. His instincts told him something was wrong, but protocol required he investigate further. He tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. Slowly, he pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The house smelled of mildew and rot, like it hadn't been lived in for years. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a long, narrow hallway. Faintly, he could hear something. Breathing? No. It was a whisper. Hello? Brooksville Police. Is anyone here? John called, his voice echoing through the empty house. The whispering stopped. Silence. John's heart began to race. He moved cautiously down the hallway, his flashlight revealing worn, peeling wallpaper and old family portraits, their faces blurred by time and neglect. As he reached the end of the hallway, he heard it again, a low, guttural moan coming from upstairs. Against his better judgment, he ascended the staircase. The steps creaked beneath his boots, and the moan grew louder, more distorted. It didn't sound human. At the top of the stairs was a single door, slightly ajar. The moaning was louder now, a grotesque symphony of pain and anguish. John's grip tightened on his flashlight as he nudged the door open with his foot. Inside, the room was empty, save for an old rocking chair in the corner. It moved slowly back and forth, as though someone had just left it. The air was thick, oppressive, and smelled of decay. But what chilled John to the bone was the sight of deep gouge marks on the floor, leading from the chair to the center of the room. John shone his light on the floor. Blood, fresh blood, pooling beneath the chair. He backed away, his mind racing. Who had called 911? Was someone injured or worse? Before he could leave, his radio crackled to life again. Unit 7, come in. Are you at the location? John grabbed the radio. This is Unit 7. I'm at the house. It looks abandoned, but there's fresh blood. I think I heard something upstairs. Need backup. There was a brief pause. Unit 7, we're not showing any active calls for 135 Maple Road. Are you sure you're at the correct address? John's blood ran cold. He looked around the room, the rocking chair still moving. The door behind him slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the moaning returned, louder, more visceral than before. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, pulsating with something evil. He tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as he kicked it, slamming his shoulder against the wood, but it held firm. Behind him, the moaning grew louder still, almost unbearable. John turned, his flashlight trembling in his hand. What he saw next would haunt him for the rest of his life. In the center of the room, something was emerging from the floor. At first, it looked like a shadow, but as it rose, it took shape. A figure, tall and thin, its body grotesquely contorted. Its face was a twisted mass of flesh and bone, eyes hollow and staring, mouth agape in a silent scream. It reached for him. John screamed, kicking the door with all his strength. Finally, it gave way, and he tumbled into the hallway, scrambling to his feet. The moaning followed him, now a chorus of voices, crying out in torment. He ran down the stairs, nearly tripping in his haste. The front door was wide open, though he hadn't left it that way. Without a second thought, he sprinted outside, not stopping until he reached his cruiser. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking, before finally starting the engine and peeling out of the driveway. The moaning didn't stop. Even as he sped down the road, it echoed in his ears, growing fainter but never truly gone. When John returned to the station, he was pale, trembling, and unable to speak coherently. His fellow officers found it hard to believe his story. No one else had received a call from 135 Maple Road. And when backup finally arrived at the house, it was empty. No blood, no chair, no sign of anything unusual. John Harper never worked another night shift. He resigned from the force shortly after, moving far away from Brooksville, though he never spoke of what had happened again. But every now and then, late at night, someone would call 911 from 135 Maple Road. The line would go dead before the operator could get any details. And when officers arrived, they always found the house empty, except for the rocking chair, slowly swaying in the corner.